Hello and welcome back to this damn full idealistic crusade. I figured it would be a fun idea to go over the handful of Indiana Jones comics that I've picked up over the years. Because I know some people have asked if I would cover the Indy comics since I'm covering the novels, and the short answer is I would love to, but unfortunately they're all out of print, and they did actually get a big series of omnibus collections from Dark Horse a number of years ago. Those were collected in the trade paperback omnibuses like their Star Wars collections of previous Marvel and other Dark Horse Star Wars comics. Like those, they are out of print, but most Star Wars stuff is now reprinted by Marvel, although the original Marvel comics have been badly recolored. But the indie comics have never been reprinted, and now those Dark Horse omnibuses are going for absurd amounts on eBay, in the hundreds of dollars per volume on some, which is just crazy. So I really regret not knowing about those until they were out of print, and I was hoping that for the new film that we would actually see Marvel print indie comics and do a big reprint thing, but unfortunately, nothing's been announced. There seem to be no plans, and it seems like the indie comics will be kept in relative obscurity, and you're stuck trying to track down back issues and original copies in decent shape, or spring for the very expensive Dark Horse omnibuses. So essentially, with indie comics, you basically have a couple different flavors. You have the retellings of the films in comic form, so the comic book adaptations. Then you have the standalone adventures, which are usually, at least from all the ones I've read, they do try to stick closely to the tone of the films, and some of the stories do not necessarily repeat the films, but they are very reminiscent of the plot beats and elements and things. And that's only some of them, because others really develop their own style but maintain the indie spirit. So I think in that sense, the comics are far more successful at feeling like an Indiana Jones film overall than the novels are, which basically don't start doing that until book 9. And so I think the comics definitely have the advantage in that area. But then the other type of indie comic was really devoted to the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which had not one, but really two different sort of runs of comics. But Indy has also had some various young adult paperbacks over the years, from the 80s Find Your Fate books that I covered in a different video, and then also the Young Indy series had a Scholastic series and some other young reader paperbacks. So there is also a slightly other world of printed indie material outside of the novels and the comics and the Find Your Fate books. There's also a bunch of random young adult books and an entire young adult indie paperback series. But there were a bunch of young indie comics. So that's why I say indie comics basically are split into three. You have the young indie comics, you have the standalone adventures, and then you have the film adaptations. And outside of that, that's pretty much it. And it seems to go in sort of cycles when indie is going to be actually made and printed and relatively popular in comics. So we start with the wonderful Marvel series, which is, of course, the further adventures of Indiana Jones, which basically picked up after Raiders became a big success and also had a comic adaptation that I would love to have. I've never gotten a copy of it yet. But I do have a couple issues of the wonderful main Marvel series, starting with this one. This is issue number 7, which is my favorite of all the indie comics I have, because it just manages to capture the right sense of adventure and fun, and it really captures the tone of the character. We have beautiful Marvel artwork of the era, nice color, and of course this features Indy and Marion Ravenwood running through the jungle, running for their lives, being shot at and chased, and even dealing with crocodiles on the front cover. And if that wasn't enough, in the opening sort of preamble action sequence, we find Indy trying to infiltrate a monastery, which also happens to not really be a monastery, but it's a hideout for the villain and his goons. But the villain and his goons come in still disguised as monks, but wielding machine guns, and Indy has to go hell for leather out of here. And if that wasn't enough, Indy goes back to report to Marcus, and Marion's there and just starts cracking wise and being awesome like Marion is, And there's a wonderful dynamic between Indy and Marion constantly bickering, and Marcus trying to be the sane man. So he's basically the straight man in a comedy routine. And this, of course, carries on the dynamic from Raiders, but also builds upon it and adds even more of a sense of fun, banter, and warmth. And then at the end of the issue, they're in the thick of it in the jungle on the run with everyone after them and seemingly everything in the jungle trying to kill them. And of course, that is just priceless Indy material. So this is the type of fun you can get in the Marvel issues. I have a couple different issues, and I've read a few others that I don't have a physical copy of. And from the ones I've read, all of them are good and all of them are fun and exciting, but some are better than others. Like, for example, I have issue 8, which is the conclusion of this story. So this is a two-parter, and this is still good and from the same relative team, but it's just, I don't think, quite as good as the first half in issue 7. So I think it's a shame that these are not in circulation right now, not available, because I would love to finally read all of these. The ones that I've read are really fun, and even though I think some are better than others and some have the indie flavor more than others, all of them are really fun, and for lack of a better term, they're old school Marvel, and they have so much charm and lovely artwork and bold color. Here's my copy of issue 10. I mean, doesn't that make you want to pick this up and read it? It's Indy on a wing of an aircraft in the air with a fist fight that's about to break out. I mean, this just makes you want to pick it up and read it, and it's such a shame that you can't actually go and get a collected edition of these right now. Here's the last one I have of the Marvel run. This is issue 14, so you can see that they're already trying some different cover artwork types, but they did keep the title and header pretty much the same across the run. If I'm remembering correctly, this ran for about 30 some odd issues, so you can collect all of them, but it will take you a while to get all the 30 some odd issues individually, and trying to get good condition copies and better condition copies, because this is still early to mid 80s. It is starting to get up there higher in price, and the mintier copies are usually pretty pricey. So it will take you quite a while to piece together a whole set of original copies that also is in really good condition, and it's also going to cost you quite a bit. But that being said, getting all of the original editions still probably will come out cheaper than the horrible overpricing of those Dark Horse omnibuses now. So if you want to get these, I would suggest just start trying to pick up original copies like I have. So I've picked up these over the years in comic sales for a dollar or so each. So I need to finally focus more on trying to get the rest of these, but I would like to have the whole series one day. Of course, Temple of Doom had to get its own comic adaptation, which unfortunately I don't have, but I do have the first issue of the Last Crusade adaptation, which of course uses for the cover an image from the opening sequence with young Indy. This is part 1 of 4, so here we have the ending of the opening sequence going into the battle on the ship with Indy versus Panama Hat for the Cross of Coronado. But this particular issue goes up until the meeting with Donovan, and again, we then have to move on to parts 2 through 4 for the rest of the film. So Last Crusade does get a pretty spiffy comic adaptation because it's spread over 4 issues. I just only have the first issue here. Then I've got a couple of the Dark Horse comics that they did for the Young Indy series, and they did a couple different types actually. So I've got 2 issues of the main series. So this is issue 4. And these would usually sort of try and adapt or work off of ideas from the series. And all of these in particular are pretty much featuring the younger Indy instead of the slightly older Sean Patrick Flannery Indy. But I will say the artwork on these is really well done. And it seems that they did try to put more effort into giving these not necessarily a prestige feel, but they do feel at least several cuts above your average comic, and the paper is of a different quality, of a seemingly higher quality. So is the inks used, and they tried to give it almost a sort of for lack of a better term, an old-timey 1930s feel to some of the panel work. It feels a little bit more old-fashioned and classical in the way that it's laid out, sort of. At least that would be how I would describe it. And that I think makes these rather interesting. And this, like pretty much all of these, is based on original teleplays for the Young Indy series. But if you're like me and not necessarily the biggest fan of the show because it was designed as a sort of edutainment experience, sometimes looking at the comic forms, the same stories do play a little bit more energetically, because it's not so much about historical info dumping on you with every line of dialogue. But I think the comics are interesting. I've just only gotten to read a couple over the years. I've also got issue 9 from the standard Young Indy series, which is in the same design as issue 4. But then they also did these deluxe versions, which I think they only did like maybe 3 of these or a handful of them. But these are nicer trade paperback versions that feel fancier. But what you're seeing here is volume 2, Search for the Onyx, which is actually the same, or it contains the same issue 4 pages that I went over earlier, in terms of this is actually just, I think these are combining a few different issues. As you can see, this has all of the issue 4 material. It's just a little fancier because it's actually a trade paperback. But we still get the nice sort of classical look. We get the nice color and everything. So if you can find these trade paperback versions of the couple Young Indy stories they did this way, it's a spiffier means of getting some Young Indy issues. In the 90s, Dark Horse not only had the Indy license for comics, but they were really the ones trying to raise the bar and also come up with the most new original Indy material in terms of story content. Yes, we had the novels, and we also had LucasArts and their pioneering games, such as Fate of Atlantis, which also got a Dark Horse adaptation. And I've got number 4 of the story arc. So Dark Horse did a really nice adaptation of the game, which is still the best Indy movie that we never got as a movie. It's the most consistent Indy story after Last Crusade we've ever gotten. And if you're not a big fan of classic DOS point-and-click adventure games, then the Dark Horse comic is a fun way to experience the same story. Again, it was done over multiple parts and is collected in those stupidly expensive out-of-print omnibuses, but I just have issue 4 of the series here. But this is actually quite colorful. It doesn't quite feel as much as a 90s comic as it actually is, and it's very well done. And it's very interesting if you're used to just playing the game and seeing the story that way, to come to the comic version and getting a really colorful, striking rendering of it, including some really nice action sequences and bits of classic gore that you need in an Indy story. So I do like reading the Dark Horse adaptation. I still prefer the game, but I just need to pick up the other issues because, again, I always hoped I would just pick up the omnibus, but again, those collected paperbacks are stupidly expensive now. Dark Horse did many other original stories. I only have one other one, and this was done as a promo because it's a shorter story, but it was also done as part of the DVD reissues of the trilogy. So for a little while, they were doing these slimmed down versions of Dark Horse Indy stories. So I have the Dark Horse story, A Shrine of the Sea Devil, in this miniaturized version, but actually still complete version. This came when the DVDs were coming out in for Crystal Skull, with the new featurette and then those nice foil slipcovers as standalones. But some of those, including one I bought back in the day, had a mini Dark Horse comic tucked in. So of course it has Crystal Skull ad on the back, but this is the entire Shrine of the Sea Devil comic, which is nicely done, nicely printed, and it's in good quality. The only problem is it's miniaturized, so you do have to it's basically harder to read some of the text blocks, but it's still done in nice quality, and it's nice to have if this is if you're like me and this is the only version you have. It's still nicely done and reprints the original, but do keep in mind it's shrunk down. This is another fun story. It's a very short kind of one and done of Indy getting involved with pirates and the actual sea devil of the title, and it's got some nice action and things and stuff you could never really do in a film, but unless you're making a Pirates of the Caribbean sequel, so that tells you the level of skullduggery that the Sea Devil gets up to. But it's a fun story. I just have it in this miniaturized pack-in version. And then lastly, I have the 2 issues of the Crystal Skull adaptation, which each of these is actually more of like a premium comic. They're a bit lengthier and a bit thicker, so they're able to do everything in just 2 books instead of 4. But I will say for the film adaptation, yeah, it's still Crystal Skull. Yes, it's still got all the same goofiness in the plot. And yeah, if you're not a fan of Crystal Skull, you're still not going to like it here. However, it does gloss over some of the real stupidity. And I think the writers of the comic and the whole comic team were kind of trying to sidestep some of the stuff in the film that makes us indie fans really get hot and bothered. So in this, I think it's very much akin to the Star Wars prequel comic adaptations and especially the prequel novelizations. In some ways, and actually quite a number of ways, the comic adaptation is a better story experience than the film. It doesn't have as many of the inconsistencies because the writers tried to get around those. They do follow the film, and the artwork is quite nice while also having a very nice, clean style to it that also inherently gives you a flavor of a different period, even though it's still a modern comic. But they consistently try to downplay the stupidity and keep the larger than life elements. And of course, they're still having to tell the Crystal Story film, but they try to downplay the CG elements, and they don't have Mutt Williams swinging around with CGI monkeys in the comic. And Indy feels a little bit more Indy-ish throughout. He has a little bit more grit. All the characters do. And some of the interactions are actually better in this comic. So I think in the adaptation process, they obviously had to cut things down for time and page count, but they also tried to cut down on some of the issues of the film. And I think the wise choice in the adaptation process when they had to cut stuff was to cut the really dumbest moments and tone down the others to try and make a more consistent and engaging experience. So here is the second half with really nice cover artwork. And of course, here in issue 2, we finally get the appearance of Miriam. And of course, again, it's still following the beats. So we have the quicksand scene and we have the chase. And even though we have the sword fighting scene, it's toned down, and it's that there's not as much back and forth. There's not as much acrobatics everywhere that are CGI assisted, because we're then pretty much immediately into the fire ant scene, which is also a bit grittier and a bit less over the top, which is nice to see. And then we also have a bit more business getting into the final temples and the lost city and more character interaction, and all of this feels more grounded, even though you still have the inconsistent as hell character of Mac, who has never made any sense. And again, the artwork is on point and rather nice. But all in all, this is a nicely done comic adaptation. I kind of went into this going, okay, am I really do I need to bother with the Crystal Skull comic? But, you know, I'm trying to read all the indie comics I can. I might as well try it. And I was pleasantly surprised. I think this is a well done adaptation, and I think it manages to at least soften the blow of the film story. And even though it's still stuck telling the story of Crystal Skull, I think it does soften quite a bit and sand off quite a bit of the rough edges. And overall, I think it's a better experience than the film, actually. So that's my stack of various indie comics and issues I've picked up over the years. It's not a whole lot, but I have always meant to try to read more of the indie comics, but I thought it would be fun to just go over what I do have in my collection, and I did reread these since I've been reading the Bantam novels, and I figured I would just turn it into a video as well since I'm doing all my other indie materials. And I'm hoping that if enough of us fans grouch about the lack of there being proper reprints of the indie comics, maybe somebody at Marvel or Disney will think, oh yeah, that would be a good idea because they're out of print. People would buy those because we all want to, but there's just nothing there. And those Dark Horse omnibuses are, certain volumes are about $100 or $150, but then others are way more than that. I mean, you shouldn't have to pay several $100s for an old Dark Horse omnibus volume, just one volume of their Indy reprints. But unfortunately, that's what they're going for on eBay. So your best bet is to just pick up individual issues. The 90s and later Dark Horse comics are easier to find. It's the Marvel ones that you do have to spend quite a bit more for getting good copies, and trying to complete a whole set will take you some time and quite a little bit of change to try and piece together. But still, it's obviously going to be cheaper than those Dark Horse reprints that are stupidly expensive right now. So unfortunately, until Disney or Marvel or somebody decides to reprint the Indiana Jones comics, this is how it is. And so I figured I would just go over my little stack of indie comics that I have in my collection. So as always, I hope my babblings about our favorite archaeologist and the world of printed Indiana Jones outside of the films has been at least somewhat fun and informative. If you've read or enjoyed any of the indie comics over the years, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And especially if you're like me and you've only read a couple random issues here and there, and you're trying to piece together a indie comic collection, I know your pain on that, because it's rather frustrating and quite bizarre that they're just not available. But at least the used market is out there, and indie comics do pop up at decent prices. But it is a bit of a chore trying to find all the various issues and complete a whole indie collection. So as always, please do keep supporting your local independent comic stores by hopefully picking up some various Indiana Jones issues to also help keep them in business. And as always, thank you ever so much for watching.